Alright, welcome back to another tutorial on this RPG template, and here I am going to go ahead and break down how the ability system works. So last video I really went super in depth on the weapon system, talked about the controller, talked about how the sword system, by the buying and selling system worked, and this system is also integrated with abilities where each sword or game item in the game has its very own unique ability. So for example, this one makes you invincible, so now I can't take damage. There's different abilities for each one. So the ultimate sword, for example, allows you to shoot a fireball. This is raycasted as well, so it's based on your mouse position. So it's not based on like where your humanoid like C-frame is. And then as well, you also have, what is this one? The short sword. I think this one's speed boost too. Hold on. There we go. Speed boost. So that's that. You also have, what else here? The dagger is projectile, so you get knives. You can go ahead and just throw knives at people. Ha. Ha. And yeah. But yeah, as you can see, each weapon has its own ability and it's all keybinded, and I'm going to go through how that is all configured here. The weapon is the key bindings and everything like that, not the key bindings, but the damage and the abilities are also linked to the tier system that the weapons have. So for example, if you have like a gold dagger, right, that its ability will do more damage than the rusty dagger, for example. And that was obviously super important to program. And yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. So this time we're going to go ahead and start here again with the client and talk all about the client stuff. So there's two clients here that are super important. The very first one is going to be the weapon controller. The weapon controller right here is going to go ahead and link your ability. So this is context action service. You don't know what this is. This is Roblox's ability to essentially bind user input to a specific action. If you have true here, then this creates a button for mobile, and we definitely want a button for mobile so they can obviously activate the ability on mobile. Then E is the key binding for the knife, and then Y on controller is the key binding for the ability on controller. Excuse me. So this is the binding for keyboard for the ability, and then this is the binding for the ability on controller. Something to keep in mind is that Roblox only works with Xbox, so it doesn't work on PS5 or Nintendo Switch, which is a Roblox like, they only want to work with, I think, Microsoft for some reason or another. So you can't program input for any other type of controller. It has to be a Microsoft like Xbox controller, a controller that Microsoft made. But yeah, just keep that in mind. So that's why you can't have like a button or what is triangle. Triangle has to be Xbox, so Y. Triangle won't work here. But yeah, so this is the binding here. Then this is going to go ahead and say that this is the ability action. So whenever this is called to run, or whenever these are binded, and these are going to be binded whenever the child from last video, whenever the weapon here is essentially tagged in here. So when the weapon is added to the right hand instance here, you see all of this is now going to run, and then the stuff is going to get binded. And then whenever you die, it's going to go ahead and unbind that stuff. So this is the binding, this is the unbinding. Cool. All right, so when that's done, it's going to go ahead and run the ability when this is binded. So whenever I click these buttons and this is binded here, it's going to go ahead and run the ability function and pass the name or the tag ability. And here's the ability function right here. This is going to pass the action name, which was declared right here, and then whatever input was given from here. So if this is, it just passes like an input object. This is literally just an input object with just a whole bunch of data involving input. So first things first is we're going to go ahead and create our checker here. So we're going to check and make sure that the action name being passed is indeed an ability, that the user is still in an input begin state, and that the time minus the last ability timer, or last ability time, is greater than or equal to the weapon config.cooldown. right? So this configs like the cooldown, stuff like that, to make sure that, you know, everything's going well and that you can do, you know, all that good stuff, right? Then we're going to go ahead and set tick here. This denotes the last time the ability was activated. This loads your projectile animation. Your projectile animation was loaded from the config module. Again, just in case you didn't watch the last video, the config module works like this. You have a base directory here. The config, this path config module then route requests based on a given tag name to a given config module. So for example, here are all the weapons. So if I wanted to go to the dagger weapon, for example, that's going to be configured in the path config here. So dagger, which is right here, is in the config ders, which is game, get service, replicator storage, arrow, shared config, and then it's going to go there to weapons and then dagger config module. And as you can see, it's under shared config, weapons, and then the dagger config module was right here. And that's how you get that. And then there is a projectile animation, which is here. Currently that is the same for all weapons, but feel free to customize that. This is also all the information about the weapons, such as knockback, the hitbox size, the ability name, its description, the min max damage, the walk speed, and jump height. All that stuff is there. Okay, all right, so let me back here. This is going to go ahead and load and play the animation. Then it's going to go ahead and call the ability controller, and this is super duper duper important. And this is going to go ahead and pass rank. Rank is configured up here. So this is again what configures the rank or the tier of the weapon. And you can even add some stuff here. So let's say you wanted to add to the cooldown or subtract the cooldown based on rank. You would go rank here. Oops, sorry, caps lock on. But essentially you would just add that as a table. So the rank table is here, and you would subtract, I don't know, cooldown, subtraction. You could add that here in this linked list, and then go ahead and come into here and go rank, and then do put parentheses and put like, I don't know, cooldown. Right, and then in here you would just need that cooldown in values. So like each one of these would then need a variable here called cooldown, right? And then that would be set to a number. So let's say Rusty takes off 1/10 of a second on the cooldown, right? That's how that would be configured. And then all of these would need that cooldown. So you'd need to go ahead and take this, and I would just copy and paste, or you can just hold the Alt key here. I believe it's Alt on Windows. And this is why VS Code is so great. It's because you can do things like this, and bam. Now they all have cooldown, and then you can go ahead and create the amount that the cooldown is lessened by here. Right? You know, good example of how you can configure more stats based on the tiers there. But that's how that works. So, and then again, the weapon controller would then read that, and then, you know, the debounce or the cooldown would be configured differently here based on the rank of the weapon. Okay, but moving along here, this is going to pass the weapon config here, and then it's also going to pass the rank. And then this is going to pass to what I like to think of as a router. The ability controller here is simply just a router. This is just simply going to take the weapon config.ability name and then route things based upon what information is passed. So here, this goes ahead and grabs the ability service, which is the client or the server side that does all the ability stuff, is right there. This is then going to take the weapon config and then the rank of the weapon. It's going to check to see what the name of the ability is. So each weapon has an ability name. So for example, if I go to short sword here, this will have fast run as the ability name. So then based on that, the ability controller is going to say, okay, the ability name is fast run. So we want to go ahead and call the server to do fast run based on this weapon config and rank. And something else that is being passed here, but it's invisible, is the player object. Now, Roblox Studio, again, in my last video, I got kind of on a small rant here, but please, 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 please make it so that I have to type in player here. That is so much better than it just being this invisible thing that is passed, because I'll forget that it's being passed here, and then I'll wonder why things aren't working. Please create a beta feature that allows me to turn that off and just makes me type in player whenever I'm going from client to server. Just make it happen. Makes life easier for everybody. But I digress. As you can see, so let's say I'm here. This is going to go ahead and pass fast run, which is going to pass player as an invisible parameter here, weapon config, and then the rank. I go to the ability service, and as you can see here, I have the fast run, which is right here, and this passes player, weapon config, and rank, just like I said. Right here, this again sets up the rank. I was having issues with this getting called from the weapon service, so I did just make a different method here. And another reason why I did this is I didn't want to have to pass player again. As you all saw last time when I went through this algorithm in the last video, it's kind of annoying when you have to pass P as a parameter into a method that will never use P, and you're only passing it because of how Roblox does client-server communication. So I decided to revamp that into a local function here, and this doesn't call P in this case, so that's why this is configured the way it is. But this is going to go ahead and set up the rank, which is going to go ahead and pull the rank config file. The rank config file is in configurations and is right here. So it's going to go ahead and pull this. This is again the data structure of a linked list, which is essentially where you have a tag here that maps to another dictionary. So you have like a dictionary within a dictionary. It's called a linked list in programming, but that's your linked list. So if we come back here to the ability service, it's going to go ahead and check here. So let's say this ability is the one that's being called. This sets up the rank stuff. And then after the rank is set up, it's going to get the character and the humanoid. Then this is the like aura that is around the character when they call the specific ability to run. This binds it to their primary part, and then this changes their run speed, right? And again, things like this can also have the ability multiplier. So the ability multiplier was essentially configured, and instead of making each ability different, so let's say I went into the tier list, right? Let's say I said, okay, I want Rusty to make the walk speed this, and then Rusty to make the projectile speed this, and then Rusty to do this, and then Iron to do this. I just blanketed all the modifiers together into a multiplier. So whatever your run speed was going to be when you did this ability, if it's gold, it's just going to be multiplied by 1.8, which is an 80% increase, or 1.6, or 1.4, or 1.2. Or in this case, legendary just doubles whatever your ability is, right? So if I go back here to the ability service, right, you have an ability multiplier. So based on whatever your ability was, so for example, I'm doing fast run here, for example, right? That's a multiplier. So whatever the weapon config.walk speed was gonna be for this ability, if you go down here to the weapon speed.walk speed or walk speed in this config, you will have the walk speed here. You will have like an ability multiplier, which essentially just, you know, doubles whatever's being passed here, right? Or this is how it's configured. It's configured based on multiplication, if that makes sense. And this is going to go ahead and debreeze that item, right? But this is what actually does the ability. It's all server configured here. And that's super important because we want the server to be doing the abilities, because if the abilities are configured on the client can hack it and you know, change what it does, so they're invincible forever or stuff like that. And this kind of configures all of that stuff so that doesn't happen. But yeah, as you can see, that's how the abilities are mapped here, and these are all the different abilities. And yeah, I actually think that's pretty much it. Let me go ahead and do a little in-depth walkthrough here of the projectile system, because that is a little bit different than these other abilities. These other abilities were a little bit easier to configure because it's just like fast run. You just double the walk speed or change the walk speed, you know, not too hard to do. You'll just have the humanoid walk speed here, and then that's also timed by this. Then, you know, actually I think this should be, I think I made a mistake. That should be right there. There we go. But as you can see, you know, that's that. And then, you know, this is the ability service, like the force field. But let's go ahead and look at the projectile, because I think the projectile ability was the hardest one. So essentially the way this works is in the folder here, you'll have an ability, And these are the abilities that you have, or the projectiles that are in the game. You have a throwing knife, you have a big fireball, and you have a basic fireball. You also have an effects, and these effects are like the auroras that were around you. So like you have a heal aurora, you have a fast run aurora, and then like a force field aurora. So if you're invincible, you will get like this aurora. If you have the fast run, you'll get this aurora, and if you have the heal, you'll get this aurora. But essentially, this is where it is, and then each one of these are tagged as an ability. And essentially, the reason why this is because if any one of these are touched, it's going to go ahead and run through the weapon service and configure the damage based on the ability tag. So let's go ahead and look here. Whenever the ability service is called to create a projectile, on the ability controller, if it's projectile, it's going to go ahead and pass wherever the mouse is. Right, so when I click E here in the game, so I'm going to go ahead and click E, just give it a second to load here. It's going to take wherever my humanoid root part is, so that's the primary part of your character model. Every character model should have one unless they're hacking. There's my humanoid root part. It's going to take that, and then wherever it knows my mouse is on the screen, like depth-wise, it's going to take that and make a ray. So it's going to take this to my mouse and make a ray. So when I call one of these abilities to run here, for example, uh-oh, that's not good. I mean, something got broken in the source code. So that's okay. But whenever I call one of these abilities to run here, I don't know what broke. Something in here, but that's okay. I'll fiddle with that later. Whenever I call one of these abilities to run here, it's going to track my mouse position. And essentially it's going to pass that information. So that's what this does. This gets my mouse position. And this is even indicated by this print here. You would even see the mouse position print. I won't go ahead and do that now, but you can actually see the mouse position print. Then we're going to pass that information to the server. And then also keep in mind, again, this is client to server, so there's an invisible parameter of player here, which again, if someone is watching a Roblox video, please get rid of that. Just make me type player there so everything's more organized, but that's okay. But as you can see, this will automatically pass player here. Then it gets the weapon config, the rank of the ability, and then the mouse direction vector. Okay, then this goes ahead and sets up your sword stuff here, gets your character. Then this is what gets the projectile. So this is the path to projectile, and then this is the projectile clone. So that's what goes ahead and grabs the projectile here from reps and clones it. Then we're going to go ahead and tag it as a weapon. Super important, because now if this is touched, it's going to run through our weapon service, right? And we saw earlier what this does. Essentially, you have this big, giant, massive weapon service, and then whenever something is touched in the weapon service, it's going to do damage. And the reason why the ability tag was so important is because of this last, if you watched in the last tutorial, you would know this. But when the weapon is configured to do damage, it's going to check and see if what hits it is an ability. And that's right here. So this tags and checks to see what hits it is an ability. If it's an ability, then you'll add on the ability damage here, which is the sword ability damage addition, plus whatever the weapon config damage was. And the weapon config damage is obviously configured here. So you should have an ability damage and all that kind of stuff. Here's the ability damage for the fire sword, for example. Okay, going back over to the ability service. But yeah, so this is why we tag it as a weapon, and it also being tagged as an ability is important. But then when this is touched, it's going to run through all of the stuff I showed you guys in the weapon system last time. Then this is what creates the object value. This is super important because when the weapon service goes to run data and configure who killed what and who hit what and configures your data store and XP and all of that kind of stuff, it needs this tag to denote the player that hit the player that casted this object. Super important tag here to put in this object value. Then it's going to go ahead and configure the position. It's configured right here, so it starts at your primary part, plus a little bit of space. Make sure the anchor and can collide's not off so you don't get any weird glitches. Parent it to the workspace, and then this sets the direction. Then we create this attachment here because for whatever reason, whenever you use linear velocity, which is a new built-in object inside of Roblox Studio. They don't like using body force anymore, so I tried to use linear velocity for this. You have to apparently attach it. So you have to like attach the linear velocity object to the projectile or whatever you're trying to speed up using an attachment, and you have to apparently do all of this code to like enable it and get it to work. But essentially this then adds a linear velocity to the object, which then makes it move forward. Then if it's touched, this isn't going to do any damage. This is simply just going to check to see if what touched it is a model not equal to the player model. My bad. This just checks to make sure that it's not the player that this touched, and if it's not the player that it touches, it destroys, right? And then if it never gets touched, this is your debris, so it just leaves, and this is your garbage collection. Okay, but that's essentially it, and that's how I had the weapons not be weird. So this is how I configured the weapons to make sure that they didn't, shoot weirdly, right? This configures it so it's based on the mouse position. And I'm going to go ahead and fetch my last origin so you guys can all see this. Fetching the new version of the game. Back down here, this should be syncing. So hopefully that fetch should fix any glitches or errors that were in the game last time. Something weird happened. I have no idea what happened here. Looks like I put a little comment that I wasn't trying to put in the weapon service. Not sure what happened, but that's okay. These are the two changes. I don't want to commit them. I just want to not commit them. But anyways, we don't have to worry about all of that. But yeah, that's how the ability service works. It's pretty big, but it wasn't as hard as how the weapon system works. So hopefully you guys were able to hang in there and learn something through this whole process. And I hope this was helpful. So go ahead, if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. We'll probably do, we did weapon system, we did ability system. We could probably do the character manager next, which does the double jump and the backflip and how that's configured across client and server. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.